And hello and welcome. I'm John Bachman. This time next week, Joe Biden will be the president of the United States, but Congress might still be wrestling with the impeachment of his predecessor. Today, the House of Representatives started the formal process of impeaching President Trump for the second time. Republicans are supporting this impeachment, more of them, of course. The votes happening today are really the procedural ones. There are, of course, more Republicans joining with Nancy Pelosi and Democrats. A lot will depend, though, on what happens with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. McConnell so far has been silent, but the New York Times reports that he is furious with the president and actually happy with the impeachment process. He might actually step aside or even aid Chuck Schumer and rush through a trial in the U.S. Senate, even before or perhaps even after the inauguration. Also, House GOP conference chair Liz Cheney has come out in support of impeachment. She released a statement saying, quote, "There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I will vote to impeach the president." The House also voted last night to approve a resolution calling for President Trump to be removed from office through the 25th Amendment, a symbolic gesture. Of course, we know Vice President Mike Pence has made it clear that he would not invoke the 25th Amendment. And joining us now with the latest on the impeachment is Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson. So, Emerald, what is the latest now? I mean, obviously this procedural stuff happening, but, you know, a lot of focus on Mitch McConnell and what he's going to do here. And we were hearing there could be as many as 12 Republican members of the House who back the impeachment process. Are we seeing those numbers growing?
Well, yes, there is definitely talk of more possible GOP Congress people getting on board with this impeachment effort. But look, it's not by and large representative of the Republicans in the House. And that's something that we're seeing is some backlash for some of the leadership, that being Liz Cheney, who, as you noted, came out in support of impeachment. She's the chair of the Republican conference. That makes her number 3 in line in the leadership of the Republicans in the House. And there's several congressmen here, including freshman Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who have called for her to resign, considering her support of the impeachment effort. Now, as you also mentioned, John, they've been going through the procedures today, establishing the rules for this impeachment. However, we do expect to see debate on the actual article, which is called, quote, the incitement of insurrection, a little bit later this afternoon. We've seen some heated exchanges between Democrat and Republican congressmen. It was particularly Congressman Jim Jordan who highlighted what he called hypocrisy from Democrats, noting that they objected to the Electoral College when there was actually no question of it back in 2017, saying they objected to more states than Republicans objected to this time. He also noted the difference in how they responded to the violence that happened last week as opposed to over the summer, saying that rioters and looters were bailed out by members of the Democrat Party. So this is definitely going to get very heated. But as you said, all questions and all eyes are really on Mitch McConnell. What does he do? You said the New York Times is reporting that he could be in favor of doing a speedy trial. And that's consistent with what we've heard behind the scenes talking to different members of Congress. A lot of those who support the president are not happy with what they're hearing from their Republican Party. And they're suggesting that Mitch McConnell sees this as a way to potentially end President Trump once and for all, and also his movement. But they're saying this is a gross miscalculation on the part of the Senate Majority Leader, in that the movement goes beyond just the president at this point. John?
You heard so many complaints about the GOP donor class, and you certainly hear those folks. Ken Langone being one of those folks, coming out today on CNBC saying he feels betrayed by the president as well. And that's really what we expect from these members of Congress like Mitch McConnell. They are concerned about the donor class, their source of money being shut off. So that's also at play here. Well, keep us updated, Emerald, on that. We're also going to talk to Marjorie Taylor Greene coming up in the second hour about Liz Cheney and the House impeachment process. Great to see Emerald. We'll get more from her coming up. All right, now the man who police say was seen at the current security situation, and get to Newsmax national correspondent Logan Raddick, who joined. We're going to get to Logan in just a second. Well, let's take a look at what it looked like at the Capitol earlier today. National Guard members sleeping in the halls of Congress, I believe, will stunt by Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi. Now, the question is, how do these House members feel about their own safety? We've heard about threats of their lives from Democrats and Republicans now. Some for Democrats who have supported the impeachment process, some because Republicans say they've faced threats because they came out and supported the election challenge last week. Do we have Logan ready yet, guys? Okay. Okay, well, obviously there's a very tense security situation here, and maybe we can take you to the Capitol right now. We've had live shots of outside the Capitol as well, and then you can see the House floor now. Again, these procedural votes are going on. Here we have Logan Raddick ready for us to give us an update and a briefing on the security situation at the Capitol. Logan, great to see you.
We know that the different investigative agencies are looking into what happened here at the Capitol, and more arrests are expected.
We're looking at significant felony cases tied to sedition and conspiracy. Just yesterday, our office organized a strike force of very senior national security prosecutors and public corruption prosecutors. Their only marching orders from me are to build seditious and conspiracy charges related to the most heinous acts that occurred.
What he said on Thursday is what we wanted to hear on Wednesday, right? And it was late.
All right, Logan Raddick for us at the U.S. Capitol. We'll get more from Logan coming up in the next hour. Coming up in our next segment after we come back from commercial break, Georgia, at least one Georgia county had a recount yesterday. It wasn't required, but they did it to restore confidence in the voting process. We'll take you there and talk about that next. Way people can rebuild trust with their own eyes. She said she could personally hear the poll workers and walk around the tables and observe what they were doing, according to that poll worker. Now, joining us to talk more about this and the overall state of voter integrity in Georgia and across the country is the executive director of the National Diversity Coalition for Trump, Bruce Lavelle. Bruce, great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, I was quite interested by this in Bartow County. Not surprised that they're doing this in a Republican stronghold. A little bit different, obviously, when you hear a woman saying, I could walk around, I could see the tables, I could hear what people were doing. Yeah. Much different scenario than what we saw on election night in Fulton County at State Farm Arena. And I think if more counties employed these types of, transparency and public integrity exercises, I think voters would be a lot more confident in the system. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, 159 counties, John, one down, 158 counties to go. I mean, let's just be real with this.
Yeah.
And I say go back and look at November 3rd night. But listen, here's the thing. The bottom line is that I love the fact that they did show some transparency and like, hey, this is how we do it. All we've been saying all along, and this is, applicable to all the battleground states, especially across the nation, is to come up with a really strong, comprehensive voter election process, and whether it be voter ID, whatever it is that you have to do. But I challenge them to do the same process in 158 more counties, especially Fulton.
Obviously much different than Fulton County, as you talked about density. But the thing is when you have an election, you got all these kind of, weird parts about it, mail-in votes and, way more than anticipated. And you have people that only do this every 4 years or so. There are going to be a lot of problems. That's going to lead to a lack of confidence. And we got to get back to that place where people feel confident about the elections process. And I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah. Well, I've said it from day one, and I still stand by this. Being a former chairman of one of the largest counties in the country, the Republican Party here in Georgia, John, and I've said this, that the mail-in ballot future of how we go to our polls.
We kind of gave a charge here in the program of people to get more involved in their local elections processes so they can see it, they can know who the players are. And this we wanted to highlight because it's exactly what we were talking about. Now let's move on and talk about Senator-elect Raphael Warnock. Looks like he's going to be sworn in after Joe Biden is sworn in as president. Now, he, like a lot of other Democrats, are focused on the race of the people who were in that Capitol Hill mob, not necessarily on what they did or why they did it. Only Reverend Warnock did it from the pulpit of Ebenezer Baptist Church last week. And take a look. Now, can the country really unite if Senator-elect Warnock and President-elect Biden continue to inject race into everything, like as soon as it happens, before the investigation is complete, before everyone is rounded up and really arrested here?
No, it won't unite. They keep throwing out these incendiary, comments like I've said all along about Reverend Warnock. And listen, John, when you put me on this show, my title is diversity. This is my wheelhouse. And I'm going to tell you, when you have a particular person, wherever you are, whether you're in ministry or wherever you are as a leader in the Congress or Senate, and you pander just for one particular race and you say things like that, just to pander and to keep your base active, you do a disservice to all the other cultures that live here in Georgia. Listen, Georgia is one of the most culturally diverse states in the country. My church alone has 9,000 members with 118 different cultures. So you see who he was talking to, the base of his congregation, which does a disservice to his folks, his followers, his congregation, what have you. It does nothing for cultural reconciliation. And this is the thing that, unfortunately, that's been guilty on a lot of folks, that how they message and how they put things out there. Listen, when he talks about that, what they stormed and this, yeah, you're absolutely right. John, there's hundreds of thousands of businesses across the country that were victims of the autonomous zones who are shut down. Watch this, John, on your show. With this first quarter, pay attention to the folks filing Chapter 7 and 11 on their small businesses who were victims of the autonomous zone, who mayors in Democrat cities, John, denied the president of even Republican governors to come in with the National Guard to save these businesses.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, you have a message about what happened when this last particular folks that stormed the Capitol. I mean,
for the city of Atlanta was it's too busy to hate. I mean, you would think that you think that Raphael Warnock would want to get to the business of the Senate. They need to help out these businesses. This pandemic is obviously still raging, and they're focused on race. They're focused on revenge, and the American public is withering in the wind. Bruce, great to see you. We got to run to commercial break. A pleasure to speak with you,
John.
as always. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, some on the left are calling for Trump supporters to be deprogrammed and sent away to re-education camps. Sounds like a fantasy of some, but might be realer than you think. Kristen Tate and Tony Katz join us next.
There are millions of Americans, almost all white, almost all Republicans, who somehow need to be deprogrammed. It's as if they are members of a cult, the Trumpist cult.
Breaks that power structure in the South is enforcement, right? There has to be consequences. And then once you get those consequences, I think then people have to take a second look at their actions.
All right, Eugene Robinson from MSNBC and the Washington Post, along with Nicole Hannah-Jones, creator of the New York Times' 1619 Project, saying that Republicans need to be deprogrammed, but only after all the president's supporters face consequences. All the president's supporters must face consequences, they say, for the actions of that lawless mob at the Capitol last week. PBS also parted ways with one of its lawyers recently. The Associated Press reports that Michael Beller was recorded offering political opinions to an undercover reporter from Project Veritas. And they're a little stronger than opinions. Now, Beller compared President Trump to Hitler and said it was great. Camps. PBS says Beller did not speak on behalf of the network. So is national unity only possible after Republicans are all reprogrammed? Joining us now to discuss this is nationally syndicated talk show host Tony Katz from Tony Katz in the Morning News. Also here with us, Kristen Tate. She is an analyst at Young Americans for Liberty. She's also the author of The Liberal Invasion of Red State America. Great to see you both. And let me just say, if we're all going to re-education camps, I hope I get to go with you guys, because at least we could have some intellectually stimulating conversations once we're inside. But I don't want to kid too much or be flippant about this, Tony, because it is concerning. It starts with the social media, and then it's these companies pulling money away and kneecapping other Republicans. Are you personally concerned about what consequences you may face for being a conservative?
First, let's always remember there's never good bourbon in the re-education camp. It just never seems to make it to the people. I think that when you take a look at that conversation with Eugene Robinson of MSNBC and Nicole Hannah-Jones, the liar of the 1619 Project, which is a myth, and that's why I called her a liar. That project is indeed a lie, not an actual basis in history. There's something rather familiar about it, which is we, the political right, has certainly said up things about the political left. That's a cult. We've said it about environmental justice. We've said it about people who support the Green New Deal. We've said it about a grouping of things. The question is, what should be done about it? We think that culturally things should change, and they think government should punish us. And that's a very large chasm of difference. I think these things are cultural things that have to be won culturally through persuasion and through understanding right versus wrong and sharing that with people. They think government should be the sledgehammer that punishes those that dare disagree with them. That's a fundamental difference that cannot be overlooked.
Kristen, we know Democrats like to talk a big game, and I wonder how much of this now is just some, chest thumping from Democrats. Do you think they're actually going to go through with a lot of these plans? You hear things like reprogram Republicans. Are you concerned about what they actually mean?
Well, they are reprogramming Republicans already. The left has full control over our education system now in the United States, at least public education. So I am very afraid of the future now that we have Democrats with unified control. If they are able to remove the filibuster, the sky is the limit for them. I mean, they could pack the Senate by adding states, give amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants. Those two actions alone would cement left-wing power in many ways for perhaps generations to come. So, of course, I think they're going to try to act on their left-wing ideas to try to reprogram conservatives through institutions of government. The only person perhaps standing in the way of all of this might be Joe Manchin. He said in the past that he does not support removing the filibuster. We'll see if he actually meant that or if he will, cave to the pressure from his fellow left-wingers. I just find this all so sickening. The Democrats have been talking about unity for the last year. That was really what Joe Biden ran on. It's clear they only want unity with people who agree with their big government ideas. And when you reframe your political opponents as Nazis, you can do anything to them.
Yeah.
And that's when you really start going down a dangerous path. And I am, if this rhetoric doesn't cool down, frankly, on both sides of the aisle,
Sure.
we could be looking at a few dark years ahead of us.
Yeah, and it's almost as if liberals are fighting over which cornerstone of our democracy they can rip out, whether it's eliminating the Electoral College or instituting a 51st state so that will give them even 2 more senators in the U.S. Senate, or as you talked about, Kristen, eliminating the filibuster. That would open the floodgates to all the stuff they want to do. And you mentioned how all of us need to tone down the rhetoric. Glenn Beck was on Tucker Carlson last night to talk about big tech's lockout of conservatives, and here's what he said.
Can't have freedom of speech if you can't express yourself in a meaningful place. This is like the Germans with the Jews behind the wall. They would put them in the ghetto. Well, this is the digital ghetto.
Now, the first part's fine. Obviously, we were highly critical of Arnold Schwarzenegger earlier this week when he made a crystal knock comparison to what happened at the Capitol last week. But shouldn't we just, Tony, put a blanket moratorium on Holocaust references? I understand, again, what he was trying to say, but it always comes across as ham-handed.
It always does, and it always will. This has been one of my subjects for forever. The Holocaust is not a crutch. This goes back to Representative Ocasio-Cortez saying that what was happening on the border was concentration camps, a despicable, nonsense, garbage thing to say that diminishes the Holocaust. What we are discussing here is mob mentality.
Right.
That's really the bigger story, more than a free speech conversation. I would disagree with Glenn there. Of course, these people are trying to stifle speech, but they're doing so because a mob is telling them to do so, as opposed to people who have a basis and understanding of freedom and liberty to stand up and say, wait, well, I don't like what they say, but they have a right to say it because they do have a right to say it. If we saw that Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt, I think that shirt's disgusting, but someone has the right to print that shirt. The question is, should they?
Right.
That's the argument. And Google and Apple and Amazon are on the wrong side of the most basic conversation of American civics.
And Kristen, as one of my favorite civil libertarians, you understand, as I understand here, it's not the speech we like or agree with that needs protecting. Oftentimes, it's the speech we disagree with that needs protecting. When you hear about, these criminal charges of incitement based on the words, just a few words that were said, I wonder if any of us are going to have any kind of ability to speak without having to read off a piece of paper that's been pre-approved by all of our attorneys.
It's a very scary road we're going down. I mean, at what point do these social media companies become the new public square? This is a free speech issue. I think what's really terrifying, in the CCP, the government controls the media. We're kind of becoming a country here that's the inverse of that, where the media is almost controlling the state. These tech companies have become way too big, way too powerful. And what's really just so frustrating about this from a right of center point of view is that when the left has the power, they utilize it. They act decisively and in ways that have, impacts for generations to come. Why is it that the right had power for the last 4 years and nothing was done about this issue? Trump always talked about what a threat big tech was to free speech, and nothing was done about it. Conservatives, we passed tax cuts. That was great, but that can be undone by the next administration.
Well,
why is it that we didn't utilize the power when we had the opportunity to do something about this?
Kristen, you know the answer, and all you have to do is Google who donated the most money to Congress over the last 4 years. It's big tech lobbyists. They are the biggest donors. They control the games. Their lobbyists write the laws that control big tech. And I say this too, guys, we're using a law, or trying to, and actually not. It's on the books and everyone cites this law. It's from 1996. Imagine trying to use a computer from 1996 and keep up in today's digital world. It's just not possible. All right, Tony and Kristen are coming back. Great to see you both. Great conversation as well. We'll talk more about the issues surfacing with Parler and what their responsibility might be in all of this, and their lawsuit with Amazon. Also coming up, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny says he will return to Russia from Germany. What could happen next? We'll talk about all that and more. Your catch-up with Rachel Roller is coming up.
Welcome back. I'm Rachel Roller. It's time now for the catch-up. 5 stories to take you behind the headlines, plus some other stories that you may have missed. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny says he will return to Russia from Germany this Sunday. Now, he says he's almost healthy and he's ready to go home. He also says that Russia is his country, Moscow is his city, and he misses both of them. Back in August, he was poisoned with a nerve agent and was sent to Germany for care. Russia was accused of poisoning Navalny, but they denied any involvement. Well, former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder will be charged over the Flint water scandal. Michigan's Attorney General reportedly told Snyder his former health director and other officials should expect initial court appearances soon. The scandal was back in 2014 when Snyder switched the city's water to the Flint River as a cost-saving measure. That water, however, was contaminated with lead, exposing tens of thousands of people. GoFundMe is banning pages that are designed to raise money for protest travel after the Capitol building protests. The company says that it condemns violence and attempted insurrection, and it will keep removing fundraisers that, quote, spread disinformation about the election and promote conspiracy theories. Now, CNN reporting that GoFundMe was popular with protesters raising money for people to get to the Capitol last week. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says the city is ending all contracts with President Trump and his company. De Blasio says that Trump incited a rebellion against the government and tried to derail a constitutional transition of power, and that's why they're doing that. Well, the Mega Millions jackpot now at $750 million after there was no ticket that matched all 6 numbers needed to claim that prize. 9 tickets matched 5 of the numbers, and this will be the 4th biggest jackpot in Mega Millions history. The next drawing, mark it on your calendar, it's this Friday night. That's it for the catch-up. John?
All right, gonna get a ticket, Rachel?
We've been talking about this all morning on Newsmax. I'm actually not a lottery player. Are you?
Yeah. No, not a lottery player, but,
There you go.
Maybe this time. I don't know. I'll play it every once in a while. I'll see if I get to a store today. And
just giving other people a chance.
If you don't see me tomorrow, you know where I'll be. All right. Just kidding.
I get it.
I love it too. I love this job too much. All right. So let's talk now about what's going on. Congressman Jim Jordan on the floor of the House. Let's listen in as the debate continues over the rules ahead of the debate for the impeachment article. Let's take a listen.
Has to stop. And frankly, the attack on the First Amendment has to stop. And stop and think about it. Do you have a functioning First Amendment when the cancel culture only allows one side to talk? When you can't even have a debate in this country, this great country, the greatest country ever? It needs to stop, because if it continues, it won't just be Republicans who get canceled. It won't just be the President of the United States. The cancel culture will come for us all. Right. America's a great country, the greatest country ever. It seems to me that we need to think about how great the people of this nation really are. Think about what we've accomplished in the past and begin to come together as leaders who represent so many great folks across our districts. Think about this. Think about this. In 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, 2 guys fly this thing they called a plane 100 feet. Barely got off the ground. Barely got off the ground. Amazing thing. 44 years later, Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier. In 44 years, we go from two guys flying a contraption they called a plane a few hundred feet to Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. And 22 years after that, another American steps on the moon. Think about it. In one lifetime, in 66 years, two guys flying 100 feet to putting a man on the moon. That's what this country is capable of. That's what we can do. And we, as the Congress who represent the people who did that, should start leading, should start understanding what really is going on here. So I hope we defeat this. I hope we can begin to come together and recognize the greatness of the American people and focus on the things they want us to focus on. I yield back our time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 3 minutes.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, we all saw it coming. Months in advance, President Trump was baselessly and deliberately whipping his supporters into a frenzy. Weeks before the riot, he used his bully pulpit to spread lies about the election. He told his supporters that the results were fraudulent. He implored them again and again.
All right, so you're hearing an exchange there. First, we saw Congressman Jim Jordan talking about, a lot of things, including all the accomplishments going from the Wright brothers all the way to landing someone on the moon in less than 100 years. Jim Jordan also making the case again from the floor of the House today as they debate the article of impeachment. Jim Jordan saying, quote, "It has always been about getting the president, calling on Congress to lead and to not do this impeachment." So they have been debating the rules, the kind of procedural aspect of the impeachment, the article of impeachment, and then what will come next. Well, the debate on the article itself, that's happening on the House floor now. And then we expect a vote on the actual article of impeachment in the House coming up at some point later today. Who knows what's going to happen in the Senate? Who knows how many votes this article is going to get in the House? It probably will pass, but the question then remains, what does Mitch McConnell do? And that is an open question. We'll get more from Emerald Robinson on that coming up at the top of the next hour. Also coming up, the Joint Chiefs of Staff calling the Capitol riot sedition and insurrection in a rare joint letter. We're going to talk to retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer about the letter and about the security of our country ahead of the inauguration. Don't go away. Bachman, now we continue to monitor the House impeachment proceeding. They've taken up the article of impeachment. This is California Congressman Tom McClintock right now speaking on the House floor. Let's listen in.
In a banana republic, does it call for vengeance? Benjamin Franklin warned us that passion governs, and she never governs wisely. In our passions this week, we've set some dangerous new precedents that will haunt us for years to come. Yesterday, we redefined intemperate speech as a physical incapacity requiring removal from office. Today, we define it as a high crime and misdemeanor. Well, the moment any member of this body gives an impassioned speech and the lunatic fringe of their movement takes license from it, be prepared to answer to this new precedent that we established today. Now, I could cite plenty of provocative speeches made by Democrats that directly preceded violence this summer, but we've already had enough of that. After 600,000 Americans had perished in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln appealed to the better angels of our nature. He said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, let us bind up the nation's wounds." Those words were so important to the unity of our nation, they're inscribed in marble at the Lincoln Memorial. I cannot think of a more petty, vindictive, and gratuitous act than to impeach an already defeated president a week before he is to leave office. President-elect Biden's promise to heal the nation becomes a hollow mockery in the harsh reality of this unconstitutional act. God help our country.
Expired.
All right, so that's Congressman Tom McClintock of California giving an impassioned speech about the danger of criminalizing political speech There you can hear him saying that if they do go forth with this impeachment and should they convict the president, they could effectively criminalize impassioned speech. We'll talk more about that aspect of this story in a second, but let's also talk about the Pentagon's senior military leadership condemning the January 6th riot at the Capitol. In a letter to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they called the Capitol breach, or I should say a letter from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they called the Capitol Hill breach a direct assault on the U.S. Congress, the Capitol building, and our constitutional process. The letter also goes on to state that the, quote, rights of freedom of speech and assembly do not give anyone the right to resort to violence, sedition, and insurrection. The Joint Chiefs closed their letter by reassuring everyone that President-elect Joe Biden will be inaugurated on January 20th. And for more on this, let's welcome in the president of the London Center for Policy Research and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Great to see you, Tony.
Hey, John, great to see you.
So this is a unique letter from the Joint Chiefs of Staff here. What's your reaction to the letter?